The secret to getting ahead is getting started. Welcome to the inauguration of the 63rd English Association of St. Teresa's College. These may not be the best of times, but despite the difficulties and limitations of this pandemic, we are extremely glad to have had the fortune to organize this event with a huge support of staff, students and well-wishers. I wish and pray that this event bring a lot of memories and the strength to step beyond the borders. A day without prayer is a day without blessing, and a life without prayer is a life without power. Let us begin this auspicious occasion by invoking the blessings of God Almighty. I invite Maria John for the prayer.
You are my hiding place. You always fill my heart with songs of deliverance. Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Let the weak say I am strong in the strength of my Lord. I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Let the weak say I am strong in the strength of my Lord.
A good teacher can inspire hope, ignite imagination, and instill a love of learning. The head of the Department of English, our support, hope, and inspiration, the dynamic and enthusiastic Associate Professor Arthur Sherry Magdalene, will now join us to deliver the welcome speech.
Guest of honor for the day, Dr. Anita Devasya, colleagues and friends in the Department of English and Center for Research, and dear students, all the undergraduate classes, the postgraduate classes, and researchers. Good morning and welcome to the inauguration of the activities of the English Association for the academic year 2020-21. I know it is quite late in the year for an inauguration, but what a year it has been. Lockdown, quarantined, sanitized, socially distanced, virtual, literally omnishambles. But in spite of it all, we must agree that it is slowly emerging a champion year. Unprecedented, unique, resilient, and gutsy. It has taught us so much, made us rely on inner resources, drawn us closer to family and friends, trained us to survive against all odds. So it is certainly a year to be marked bold, and for the resolve to do so, I must first commend the teacher in charge of the association this year, Miss Tessa Jose, for her steely determination in choosing a theme, narrowing down on the guest, and working on every tiny detail to make this day happen. Now, to welcome our guest. When I look on Miss Anita, former colleague and forever friend, the last word that comes to mind is guest. She is one of us, both as alumna and former professor of the English department. And yet, she is also far above us, an outstanding researcher and renowned translator. And it is with immense pride and affection that I welcome you today to deliver the inaugural address. I am certain that all of us in the department will be enriched and inspired by your wide and varied experience, by the expertise and skill you have acquired over long years of research, and above all, by your simple and unassuming demeanor. Anita ma'am, welcome. Happy homecoming. And in single file, let me welcome all the teachers and students of the department. We are the English Association, and in carrying forth the tradition of the inaugural and subsequent activities, we only extend the legacy of a 64-year-old department in a 96-year-old institution. A legacy we must be both worthy of, and which, when we pass on, must be enriched and embellished by our presence and our accomplishments. A word about the theme, Beyond Borders, most appropriate to the English department at St. Teresa's College, a department that proudly stands on the laurels of two established translators, Miss Anita and Priya. Well begun is half done. The other half is left to you, dear students. Carry the baton forward. I wish Tessa, the Student Secretary, Ms. Salma Sahir, and the Association all the very best. I place on record all the meticulous planning and hard work that has gone into the making of this day, in spite of the sustained and endless obstacles this last year brought. What if it is late in the year? Today is undoubtedly the best day to inaugurate tomorrow's promise. Thank you.
Translation gives the work a new reality, a second existence, an existence in another culture, another time, and another reading community. It's our privilege to have Dr. Anita Devasya to share her thoughts on the reminiscence of her journey as a researcher in comparative literature and translation studies. To most, she is a familiar figure as the one who gave life to O. Chandamenan's Indulekha by keeping its true essence. To us, she is one of our own, a member of Theresian family. Without much ado, let us listen our dear Anita ma'am.
Life is not a series of jig lamps symmetrically arranged. Life is a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from the beginning of consciousness to the end. Virginia Woolf from Modern Fiction. Good morning, everybody. I wish to share with you my experiments and experiences as a researcher, which has its beginnings more than 40 years ago. The year I completed my MA in English Language and Literature from Sacred Arts College, Tevra. This research interest was instilled in me by my English teachers in school, Mrs. Lily Annie Abraham and Mrs. Ratnamala Sinha. The live experience of Shakespeare's Macbeth and Charles Dickens' Great Expectations and William Golding's Lord of the Flies in the elective literature paper fascinated a young girl of 15 and opened up the world of British English literature. In the 6th standard, Mrs. Lily Annie Abraham taught us William Wordsworth's poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, and I could visualize daffodils nodding their heads in sprightly dance. The class explored the biography of the poet and the locale of the poems he wrote. Swami and Friends was part of the syllabus, and Malgudi, the fictional locale of R.K. Narayan, formed the project work done by the class. During my BA at St. Teresa's College, I spent hours in Mother Veronica Library, housed in the now Commerce section of the college. From this library, I frequently borrowed books. It was indeed such fun to sit in the silent space and delve into the depths of other worlds opened up by the writers. As you all know, this is a wonderful library which is managed by Miss Alwyn and later by Miss Juliet. My pranamam to all my English and Hindi teachers, and also to Mrs. Annie Thomas, who taught sociology. With my teachers, I continued my learning experience of a wealth of English and Hindi writers and discovering more and more about the two languages. I'd like to mention here that the study of sociology at the BA level helped me later on to understand anthropology and ethnography. Renuka S. was my classmate and friend during my BA days. Renu's answers were clipped, precise and well formed. It was a pleasure to look at and read the presentation of her answers, be it annotations, short answers or long essays. My own written down answers went from Kanyakumari to Kashmir following a zigzag route. One of the teachers, Sister Therese Mari, who taught us Paradise Lost and other poems, in fact commented in the margin, "Is this an annotation or an essay?" My journey through my learning experience in Sacred Arts College is closely associated with the wonderful teachers there and my classmates and friends. There was a general library in the main building, while the main library was next to our classroom. The jovial yet scholarly atmosphere in the classroom was sometimes touched with the feel of the outside. Most of us would go once in a while to the lake view to experience the breeze that came from the backwaters and to watch the swaying fronds of the coconut trees. A sojourn through English literature from Chaucer to the modern times and the history of the English language and phonetics with its infinite number of laws and vowel shifts, or so it seemed. All these are familiar to you now. We also had a paper on American literature where I was fiercely attracted to the poems of Emily Dickinson and her world. With Jairam Sir, my classmates and I took turns in presenting seminar papers on non-detailed topics which were included in the syllabus. We spent many Saturdays like this, presenting, discussing, and of course, how can I erase the memory of Paramburis, Vadas and Chaya? All these would be brought from the canteen. The one who was presenting the seminar would treat all the rest of us. In the first and second MA, I learned to organize and write a review, present a seminar paper, and be responsible for what I wrote. The essay, Death of the Author, 1967, by the French literary critic Ronald Barthes, came into the academic ambit later, at least in the University of Kerala. How can I forget walking down to the Indian coffee house at the Tevra Junction and the coffee sessions that followed? The inside of the coffee house allowed discussions of the lessons, films we had watched, books we had read or not read, answers that we had written down, the seminars to be presented, what was to be studied for the exam, and the notes to be hand copied. No photocopiers those days, only carbon copies that helped us share written notes. We thought that we were in the coffee houses of London of the 17th and 18th centuries. The coffee house visits and discussions were few and far between because the money pooled in to pay the bill for the famous beetroot cutlets and filter coffee came from saving the bus fare by walking to and from the college. After my MA, I had a chance to go to the American Studies Research Center, ASRC, Hyderabad. There I met Professor Isaac Sequeira, known for his expertise in American literature and a professor at Osmania University. I tried to discuss my research interest in Emily Dickinson. At the first go, Professor Sequeira said that Emily Dickinson had been over-researched. This really broke my heart. He suggested that I read up at the library there. He helped me discover a number of American poets like Adrian Rich and Dennis Levertov, who I could research on for my PhD. I spent some weeks in the library and came back with basic reading material on some of the American women poets. After a teaching appointment for a few months at St. Mary's College, Trichy, I joined St. Teresa's College as a junior lecturer in a leave vacancy. Sister Seraphia was the principal and Sister Mary Rose the head of the department. I taught poetry, prose, grammar, composition, novels, short stories and plays written by Shakespeare and other playwrights, all focused on English language and literature. Sister Marie Cecil, the next principal of the college, one day called me into her office and told me about the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, CFL, now MPhil, Hyderabad, and the teacher training courses offered there. To quote her, "There's a teacher training and research institute in Hyderabad, CFL. Write to the registrar about your interest in further studies." And that is exactly what I did. I registered for the postgraduate certificate in the teaching of English, PGCTE course in the distance mode. Most of the assignments that I was required to do were penned in the library, now housed in the new building. This was in 1982-83. One day, I was to teach the pre-degree PCB class the narrative poem The Haystack in the Floods by William Morris, a Victorian writer. My problem was, how do I explain to them what a haystack is? I tried explaining, then drawing a haystack on the blackboard and even acting it out, all to no avail. Finally, I fell back on what the CTA course had taught me. I decided to use the mother tongue. I knew by doing so, I would be breaking the norms of the University of Kerala and be swimming against the tide. But I pressed on. To cut a long story short, I told the class that haystack is Vaikul Thuru. I could see light dawn on them. I was jubilant and felt happy that many of the students had finally understood. I could hear them murmuring, "Itrayum ullo misse." Later, I shared this teaching experience with some of my friends, initially with trepidation and then with assurance and assertion. With the PGCT and PGDT course at CFIL through the distance mode, I developed an interest in doing research in phonetics and linguistics. The lessons in these papers were written very interestingly and explained very well too. Of course, the fact that I got good grades in all the assignments and the final exam motivated my interest in this area. I read in the Ramesh Mohan Library at CFIL and branched off into a newfound interest in neurolinguistics. At this time, my interest in literature was lying dormant in my being, but the embers fanned into flames by the CTA course in the interpretation of literature. These lessons were written by Dr. Susi Tharu. One evening, when I visited Susi at her home, where she was at work with another regular participant, I mentioned my interest in phonetics, linguistics, and neurolinguistics. I also told her how much I enjoyed reading her lessons in the interpretation of literature and doing the assignments for the course. The CTE and later the DTE participants, through the distance mode, had to attend the midterm and the final contact program. Luckily for me, the contact programs were at CFIL. There I met other teachers who took classes, tutorials, and conducted the examinations. Dr. Priya Hosali, the head of the correspondence course at that time, and herself a phonetics expert, reinforced my interest in this area. My only regret then was that I did not opt for the Indian writing and English paper offered as part of the PGDT course. In July 1987, 3 other teacher candidates and I were admitted into the MLit course. We were awarded the CFIL Teacher Fellowship for 1 year. This made me very happy indeed. I had just turned 30 and I realized that I had already acquired 6 years of teaching experience at St. Teresa's. All 4 of us, the teacher candidates, had completed the CT and DT courses. The ELT and linguistics participants did a common coursework, whereas the literature participants worked with their supervisors to chart out 4 courses as background papers relevant to their topic of research. Sister Margaret and I had opted for MLit in literature. Along with our MLit coursework, we had to also study the 4 courses that were part of the Diploma in English Studies course. Dr. Susi Tharu, Dr. Alok Bhalla, Dr. S.V. Pradhan, and Dr. Mohanty of the English department offered these courses. Included into these courses were assignments, seminars, organizing seminars, theatrical performances, and attending and organizing workshops and conferences. There were film retrospectives too of well-known film directors of the bygone era and of the 1980s from different languages. It was in one such conference that went on for a week that I watched the theatrical performance of Charandas Cho by Habib Tanvir and listened to Vandana Shiva and a number of other speakers. For the first time, about 7 to 8 years after my MA, I entered into a new learning experience. To begin with, the synopsis of my MLit interview was on the work of Adrian Rich and Dr. Susi Tharu, my MLit supervisor. I'm proud to say that I journeyed with her on a learning experience which is alive even today to this moment. While reading up in the library and doing the coursework for the DES and MLit simultaneously, which would have been 18 to 20 hours most days, and that is no exaggeration, a wonderful experience in translation took place in my life. Susi was working with Afifa, Mukesh and some other students on a big project which was in the offing. The monumental Women Writing in India, 600 BC to the present, Volume 1 and 2, edited by Susi Tharu and K. Lalita and brought out by the Feminist Press, New York in 1991. One day, Susie called me over to her house to help her translate Mara by Sarah Joseph, 1979, from Kadinde Sangeetham. For many evenings, we sat together at a study table, grappling with the intricacies of translation, sometimes searching for a turn of phrase or an apt word in English that could capture an experience encapsulated in a Malayalam word with its historical, social, political, and cultural connotations. Thus, I learnt with Susie the early lessons in written translation and the resonances of the politics of translation. How English is a politically powerful language compared to Malayalam, a regional language. While I was working on my MLit, I made new friendships. My dear friends Afifa, a senior doing research in linguistics, Vijaya, a full-time DS student, and later Murli, a junior who worked on his MLit with Susie on Anita Desai. Premlata, who worked with Dr. Pradhan, helped me sort out my notes and bibliography when I finished writing my MLit. To this day, I flounder when I have to sort out notes and bibliography. The translation of Mara marked the beginnings of my MLit work. It was a comparative study of two women's utopias of the early 20th century. The dissertation was submitted in June 1990 and it remains unpublished. The title of the work is Dreamers and Their Dreams, Women's Utopias of the Early 20th Century, Begum Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussein's Sultana's Dream and Charlotte Perkins Gilman's Herland. My dissertation attempts to look at two seminally important but little known feminist utopias of the early 20th century. Both these works were written by women and both are specifically feminist interventions in the utopian debate of the time. Sultana's Dream, 1905, was written by a Bengali writer, activist and social commentator, Begum Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussain, 1880-1932. The second one, Herland, 1915, was written by an American feminist, activist, thinker and philosopher, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 1860-1935. Both these works are significant contributions to the utopian ideas of the 19th century as well as to feminist theory. It is surprising that these works are not better known given the scope of the visions embodied in them and their self-evident artistic achievement. It would not have been incorrect to say that they have been victims of the overall marginalizations and delegitimization of feminist ideas and women's art. It would not be incorrect to say that they have been victims of the overall marginalizations and delegitimization of feminist ideas and women's art. My MLit took 2.5 years altogether, 6 months devoted to the DES coursework and another 1.5 years for the MLit coursework. I worked at many libraries to locate sufficient material for the two works I had chosen to study. Susie brought me a copy of Sultana's Dream and a copy of The Yellow Wallpaper, a seminal work by Gilman, when she returned from one of her several conferences abroad. I must say that I have been indeed fortunate to go to CFIL for research. Sister Emmeline, former principal, had granted me 1 year's leave, and as a teacher candidate at CFIL, I got a teacher fellowship that covered the hostel fees. But my 1 year leave and my teacher fellowship got over. However, I continued to work on my MLit, reading up, slowly absorbing many new ideas and new thoughts to provide a background to my written work. At my request, an extension of leave was sanctioned by the college manager and the principal, and I worked steadily on. Discussions with senior and junior fellow participants took up time as I had to come to terms with a new approach altogether. In Susie, I found a mentor and a friend. Susie's students made friends with her friends, and Susie's family became our family too, and CFIL Hyderabad a second home. Hard work interspersed with attending seminars, presentations and discussions, and of course, how can I omit to mention the trips in Sweet Chariot, Susie's ambassador car to Secunderabad, where at Hotel Paradise we savoured the delights of Hyderabadi biryani, kebabs and Kubani kamita. Some evenings it was softly den for ice creams. 8 to 9 of us as students would be packed into the car on Saturdays. The mess did not serve the evening meal on that day. And late night, before the hostel gates closed, Susie would drive us back to campus. After 1.5 years of idyllic reading and learning experience, I returned to college to teach and to work on my MLit. I was writing my dissertation during that time. These two different yet similar experiences took a great toll on me. I must say it was indeed a strain on me. I took 1 extra year to submit my dissertation. Submitted my MLit thesis in June 1990 and the degree was awarded in December 1990. By the time I was awarded MLit, I had cleared the JRF in the second attempt and was ready to take the interview for PhD at CPhil. My synopsis was on transformation fiction for women in India, written during the late 19th century. My interest in this area developed and consolidated during my reading, discussions, the group work, and the interactions with fellow participants. The fact that I was doing my research with Dr. Susie Tharu was further motivation to work in this area. At this time, Susie was working on women writing in India. Most of us, her students and other students like Afifa and many of Susie's fellow workers and friends were involved in the work that was going on towards its publication. The 2 volumes contain a wealth of little-known works which had not been included in the canon down the centuries. Now we can turn to these marginalized literatures that are available in the 2 anthologies, both for our reading pleasure and academic study. Many students at CPhil and universities abroad and in India consider these anthologies very precious. The introduction and the section introductions contain a wealth of scholarship. I am not going into the details, though I can dwell at length on the worth of the volumes, the related literature, and the scholarship which has developed drawing on these 2 volumes as a resource material. Now to my PhD coursework and its different stages. After the interview, when I got admission, Sister Emlyn, the principal, granted me leave. Dr. Susie Tharu and Dr. Venkat Rao of the Department of English Literature were my supervisors. The coursework was designed by them. While doing my coursework, I was given time with Susie one day during the week and with Venkat another day of the week, and with both of them together once a week. On the suggestion of Susie, I audited her course on Indian writing in English for 5 years while I was a full-time student at CPhil. For more than 1 year, my area of research remained transformation fiction for women. Then gradually it narrowed down, or wouldn't it be right to say, widened into translation studies. I was to do a translation of Indulekha, one of the texts which had been included in my synopsis. This topic of a translation of Indulekha for a PhD raised a question in the research subcommittee. Was a translation of a work good enough for a PhD in literature? Finally, after much discussion, it was approved as a topic for study. It was agreed that the translation would be prefaced with a critical introduction. So 1 more coursework on translation studies had to be done. My thesis remained transformation fiction for women. However, Oxford University Press, OUP, published my translation and the preface without including a section on transformation fiction for women, which I shall elaborate on as briefly as possible after I introduce my translation of Indulekha. The years 1889 and 1890 were singularly eventful ones in the history of Malayalam literature. The year 1889 saw the composition and publication of Indulekha, widely regarded as the first real novel in the language. The title, which is also the name of the young, Western-educated Nair woman protagonist of the novel, can be translated as a fine crescent of the new moon or an initial scripting. Written by a distinguished Nair scholar and administrator, Oyarath Chandamenon, who is also remembered today as the author of the bold note of dissent that is appended to the Malabar Marriage Commission report of 1891, the novel was a runaway success. The first edition was sold out in 3 months. A new edition was prepared within months. Written in 1889, Indulekha was translated the very next year by W. Dumurg, the collector of Malayalam and translator of Malayalam for the Madras government. Another translation by R. Leela Devi entitled Crescent Moon appeared in 1979. Dumurg himself openly declares in a famous translator's preface that he undertook the translation of Indulekha because the depiction of Nair family life and Nair customs found in the novel as well as the colloquial Malayalam that Chandamenon had used, would be of immense value to the Europeans. Our Leela Devi's intentions are not explicitly declared, yet they are apparent in her choice of word and phrase as well as in what she chooses to stress and what she omits. Crescent Moon is a charming romance. My translation has grown out of a critique of the frameworks, colonial, formalist, in which these earlier translations were done. It is also an attempt to return to the 19th century novel with questions that have emerged largely from contemporary feminism and from the critique of colonial discourse. Aspects of the novel that are obscure in the earlier translations emerge in a reading of the novel as engaged in the transformations that were taking place in the 19th century with regard to gender and Indian society. I have regarded the novel as an initiative in social and cultural transformation and as critique of the British government's attempts to reform the marriage and inheritance practices of the matrilineal Nayars. My translation also embodies a shift in translation practice from a framework where the issues are those of faithfulness to the meaning of the original and readability in the target language to a framework that takes into consideration the politics of representation. In order to understand the historical underpinnings of the seminal work better, the critical introduction begins with a brief note on the novel and my translation. It then moves on to a study of transformation fiction, the genre to which Indulekha may be said to belong. Studies have provided us with a renewed appreciation of the scope as well as the depth of the cultural transformations that took place alongside the establishment and consolidation of colonial power in India. In particular, they have enabled a fresh understanding of the social reform movements of the 19th century and an Indian nationalism that emerged in the context of colonial domination. A large number of the reform initiatives were focused on the status of women, their education, the reform of family structures, the development of a secular and scientific mindsets. Indeed, the whole issue of a transformation of a traditional society into a modern or modernizing one was inextricably linked to the status of women. Sati, widow remarriage, Kulin polygamy, child marriage, Parda, the education of women, and the age of consent were the principal issues of public discussion and initiatives of reform. At the heart of what were often passionate and acrimonious debates were questions related to the family, marriage, sexuality, decorous dressing, housekeeping and hygiene, socialization of children, and the inheritance of property. These movements would appear to have taken place all over India, though nearly all the research and documentation that is available in English deals with the Bengal, Bombay and Madras presidency areas. In fact, the Bengal-centered scholarship on the 19th century has been so powerful that the history of India in this early modern period is invariably written as a history of public initiatives in Bengal. Other regions, it is assumed, followed the pattern of Bengal. As a result, extremely significant regional experiences have often been obscured and consequently also unresearched. Furthermore, other regional experiences have tended to be described as exceptions or anomalies in a national history that is based on the experience of Bengal or Bombay. In a section on transformation, there is a detailed analysis of the forces which led to the transformation of the domestic sphere that played a critical and perhaps definitive role in the shaping of modern society the world over. In Europe, during the 18th and continuing into the 19th century, the contact book writers, through their efforts at instructive writing, tried to inculcate desirable norms of propriety and decorum among the women readers, and the notion of the proper lady became widespread. This reference is taken from my friend Vijaya's unpublished MLit dissertation, Conservative or Radical, Jane Austen and the Feminist Consciousness in the late 18th century, 1992. Similar efforts were made in Kerala. A magazine called Keraliya Suguna Bodhini, inculcating values pertaining to Kerala, was published for women in Kerala beginning 1887. It ran for 6 months and was restarted in 1892. It included articles on the body, short stories, articles on good conduct, entertainment, the duties of women, cooking, music, lives of model women, histories of the land, and reviews of books. The first issue came out with a poem titled Stri Vidyabhyasam, Education of Women by Kerala Varma Valiyakoi Tamburan. An astonishing number of early novels in modern Indian literatures were focused on women, with the protagonists being female figures. Mostly written in the latter half of the 19th century, these novels dwell on the nature of the new woman and her role in modernizing Indian society. Fulmoni O Karuna Bibaran, written in 1852 by Hannah Catherine Mullins, is analyzed. This is followed by a brief study of the Slayer's Lane by Mrs. Collins. A more detailed study of Krubabai Satyanathan's Saguna and Kamala I attempted. If the earlier initiatives of transformation through literature are tutelary, works like Saguna and Indulekha attempt to plumb the philosophical and political depths of modernity as it transforms its women protagonists. After my PhD coursework was completed, a pre-PhD comprehensive examination followed. This was an open book exam where the candidate answers 2 questions. This answer had to be full-fledged research papers with relevant notes and bibliography. The paper had to be typed out in double space and presented as copies. This was followed by a viva, after which the results were announced and successful candidates had their JRF raised to an SRF for another 3 years. I was fortunate to complete this difficult phase successfully. The translation of Indulekha and material collection went on side by side. Trips to various libraries in and outside Hyderabad, attending seminars and conferences, all of these were a pleasure. I read a paper with Susie at the School of Letters, MG University. We students called it the Kerala History Seminar. Susie and I jointly presented a paper titled Englishing Indulekha, Translation, the Novel and History. This paper came out as an article in Haritam, Journal of School of Letters, number 6, 1995. This article later came out in Critical Theory, Western and Indian, edited by Prafulla Sikar. Some years later, A.V. Sri Kumar and M.T. Ansari translated this article into Malayalam as Englishing Indulekha, Paribhasha, Novel, Charitra in Samvadam 4, September-October 2000. This paper formed the theoretical backbone of my study. While working on my PhD, I tried for a Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship to go and work in London on the archival material available in the India office. However, I was not able to get the fellowship. Susie got me a copy of the relevant parts of the Malabar Marriage Commission report. I was later able to work in the Tamil Nadu archives in Egmore for over a month, where I located and read up much material on Chandu Menon and the relevant documents related to the time the book was written in. However, a serious lapse in my research was my failure to locate the first edition of O. Chandu Menon's Indulekha. This has been pointed out by Dr. P.K. Rajashekharan and Dr. P. Venugopal in an article which came out on April 13, 2014 in Madhubhumi Weekly titled Nashta Bhagangal Chertha Indulekha Vaiku. During the course of study, Susie encouraged all of us to discuss with her as well as with other teachers, students and subject experts topics of common interest. This resulted in Sunday gatherings in our office room. Students working with other supervisors also joined this group. The working papers were discussed. This helped us critically look at our work from a different perspective. Susie asked us to contact experts in the field to talk to her students and to also discuss their own work with us. We had to prepare well the reading material that would be the topic of discussion on these Sundays. It used to be a whole day exercise and no one would want to break up for lunch. At the end of the Sunday session, we would saunter up to have tea at the tea shop in the Osmania University campus just outside the main gate of the institute. In one such session, Professor Kodan Ram of Osmania University, now retired, led a discussion on Marxism. He was a key leader in the separate Telangana movement. We also invited Professor Kancha Ailaya, who shared with us his experiences as a professor of political science in Osmania University. Another haunt of mine was the Inauguration Research Center for Women's Studies. Many a day, I would lounge in one of the comfortable chairs and read to my heart's content. I had the good fortune to attend many discussions by leading activists, scholars, artists, health workers, and of course writers. In one such meeting organized by Anveshi, Mahashwada Devi addressed the gathering and, much to the surprise of all of us, said that her favorite South Indian dish was masala dosha. While she ate the masala dosha, some of her students sat around her making casual conversation. That day is still vivid in my memory. I remember Mahashwada Devi as a small built woman with firm, purposeful strides. A follow-up of the Kerala History Seminar was organized in Hyderabad by Susie and her students. All of us took part at welcoming the participants of the seminar, from the accommodation to food, to charting out the sessions and the after-sections discussions. On the penultimate day, a dinner at Susie's house was arranged where everyone relaxed, discussed various issues in the academia and what was happening in the university syllabi and the ripples created in the syllabi of the affiliated colleges, both in the general English and the main English courses. Today, as postgraduate students, you are well aware of the changes that reverberated in the academia in the 1980s, reflected both in the compulsory and elective courses that you offered. You must have read the published thesis, the seminal works, and the theoretical arguments that led to these changes in the curriculum of the central universities across the country. The changes which took place were not simple, but the effect of complex forces working in the world and in India. Discussing that will require a full-length paper, but you can read up the scholarship related to this during the course of your study. While writing my PhD dissertation, 3 of us Susie students wrote out a discussion on feminism and had it recorded with a moderator at the All India Radio Hyderabad. This recording helped me to chart out a plan for the radio practicals in the course that is designed for the 3rd year Communicative English class, Broadcasting Media, Radio, TV and Cinema. The Communicative English class also studied a paper on creative writing and translation studies. I handled the section on translation studies after I came back to teach. This portion comprised a section on translation theory as well as praxis. Now going back to my PhD, I read in libraries both in Kerala and in other states. This is for collecting material for the critical introduction and for writing the drafts of the translation. A few of my friends helped me edit the various drafts, and Susie formed the backbone of the correction of the translation and the writing of the critical introduction. In December 1995, my leave got over and so did my fellowship. This meant that I had to come back to teach. Once in Kochi, I was writing, translating, typing out drafts of the translation and the critical introduction on the one hand, and on the other, teaching and managing the home front. But in all this, I had the complete support of my family and my friends, both in college and at CFIL. During college holidays and in between taking leave, I'd go over to CFIL to work full-time on my PhD. It took another 4 years from 1996 to 1999 to complete the drafts of the translation and the critical introduction. Here I must mention that without Susie, I'd never have been able to complete my PhD. Writing never came easy to me, but Susie and many of my friends supported me as I went through the agonies of writing my dissertation. Translation is also creative writing just as much as actual writing is. Now on to the final stages of putting together the whole dissertation. Is completing my portion for my classes to ask for leave when Sister Tessa, the principal, asked me whether I did not want to complete my PhD. I mentioned that I was going to approach her to ask for leave after finishing the syllabus for the term. She granted me leave and I went to CFIL. My term of registration was coming to a close in December. The final draft was done, the critical introduction put in place with an unruly entry of notes and bibliography. Susie took one look at the notes and bibliography and said, "Sit with J. Srinivas and format the notes and bibliography." We formatted it over some days and finally it was all done. The typed and corrected final draft was ready and the printout was taken from Sister Sophie's computer. Manohar, Shushil and Sophie helped me format the translation and the critical introduction. Photostat copies were done outside at a cafe in Tarnaga. Finally, the bound copies came. There was much joy and exhilaration on the part of my friends. I must say, my PhD dissertation was the joint effort of many of my friends and me. Finally, it was submitted on 22nd November 1999 and the degree awarded in December 2000, 20 years after my MA. This brings me to the end of my story of research at CFL and my interest in translation theory. Needless to say that as I carved out my story, I have chiseled, sculpted and honed the edges into a linear narrative. Finally, I'd like to thank Maggie and Tessa for giving me an opportunity to address the students, Vijay and Manohar who found time in their busy schedule to discuss the matter of this presentation, Susie who encouraged me to think about my research when I mentioned to her that I'd been asked to share my thoughts on comparative literature and translation studies, Sudha, Leela and Renu for their support.
2019-20 was a colorful and vibrant year for the Department of English and Center for Research. We are indeed proud to present the annual report. Ms. Salma Sahir, Association Secretary for the academic year 2020-21, is here to present the annual report.
The Department of English and Center for Research organized its 62nd English Association inauguration on the 21st of June 2019. Veteran Malayalam writer A. Sethumadhavan joined us as the guest of honor. The association used the platform to launch their theme, Alphabet of Change, and its logo for the academic year. The thrust of the association activities was the promotion of inclusive thinking. The students also paid homage to renowned playwright Girish Karnad by enacting a scene from his play Haivadana. The students of the English department celebrated Yoga Day on the 27th of June 2019 through yoga practice sessions. The association organized Melantha, an exhibition on Gothic works on account of Frankenstein's Day on 29th August 2019. The students of 3rd DC Literature put up a play on the origin of the novel Frankenstein. On the 23rd of August, the department, in collaboration with the Center for Research and Development of the college, organized a cultural exchange program. On the 3rd and 4th of September, a book fest was conducted by the department in collaboration with the library and NBS. The department collaborated with the Sociology Department to conduct a panel discussion on genders, explorative discourses and reflections on 26th September 2019. The panel consisted of Vijay Rajamallika, transgender poet and social worker, Prijit PK, founder and president of Cure Rhythm, and Dr. S. Girish Kumar, assistant professor, Department of Malayalam, Sri Keralavarma College. The English Association organized a workshop on recent trends in literature on the 17th of October 2019. The workshop was conducted by Dr. Rajesh V. Nair, Professor of English, School of Letters, FG University, Kottayam. It was followed by a session on the latest edition of the MLA Handbook led by Dr. Priya K. Nair, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Teresa's College. We also collaborated with the Antarashtra Pustagolsava Samiti for an interactive session with Subrabharati Manian, Tamil writer, on the 4th of December. The department organized a creative writing workshop by Tenzin Sundu, a poet, writer and Tibetan activist. This was followed by a translation workshop led by Dr. K. M. Sharif, head of the Department of English, Calicut University. As part of the Kerala Literature Festival, the English Association, in collaboration with DC Books, organized an interactive session with renowned writer William Dalrymple on 3rd January 2020. The platform was also used to launch Dalrymple's work, The Anarchy. The association held its annual literary fest, Panache, on 1st February 2020. Mr. Roshan Matthew, film actor and theatre artist, and Mr. P.R. Arun, film director, were the chief guests for the function. The theme focused on breaking stereotypes to shatter the mold of societal expectations. 4 on-stage and 6 off-stage events were held. Sacred Heart College, Thevara, emerged the overall champions. On the 25th of January, a one-day national seminar was organized by the PG students of the department on describing history, new directions in historiography. The chief speakers of the day were Vinod S. Balakrishnan, a poet and professor at IIT Trichy, and the renowned historian Manu S. Pillai.
We are now about to witness the most awaited and the most vital part of this event, the launch of the official logo of the English Association 2020-21. Here we go.
Art has the power to move minds. It translates human emotions and feelings and thus holds the power to break barriers and bind all of humanity. By adapting itself to the various languages of the people, of the places and of the times, art pushes away limits, blurs borders and dissolves barriers. It possesses the power to resonate, echo and amplify itself with every step it takes, to be born again and again and never die, to live beyond the here and the now. The English Association 2020-21 hereby presents to you our theme for this academic year, Beyond Borders. Our logo depicts the idea of how art, in the process of creation, adds color, depth and texture to our world. Like the pen that holds the feathers together, each artist around the world, practicing their individual styles of art, ultimately forms a harmony of diverse voices unified through art. The pen, symbolic of all forms of art, is a priceless tool of resistance as well as celebration. In a way, art itself becomes the wings that help us take off and fly beyond borders, all the while resisting, creating and celebrating life, truth and hope.
As we come to the end of this function, we have our treasurer Nandana Mohan to deliver the vote of thanks.
Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. As we come to the close of the inauguration of the English Association 2020-21, I consider it a great privilege to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this occasion possible, despite the pressing times that we are going through today. With great reverence, I'd like to place on record my sincere thanks to our chief guest, Dr. Aditya Devasya, for her wholehearted consent to be part of our event and for the thought-provoking words that she left us with. I'm also deeply thankful to the administration, our principal Dr. Missy Matthew and Provincial Superior and Manager Reverend Dr. Vinita CSST for their continued support for all the activities and endeavours of the department. Next, I'd like to express my gratitude towards our head of the department, Maggie ma'am, for constantly backing us up on our efforts and for the ceaseless support she lends to all the activities of our association. Thank you, ma'am. It is also my pleasure to thank all the teachers of the department for all the support and guidance. Last but never the least, I thank all the students of our department who readily shoulder the various responsibilities assigned to them, without whom this event would not have been possible. Let me conclude by thanking each one of you who have joined us today. Thank you.